So, good morning, everyone. Thank you very much, Eva Diaz, Liliana Domingues, all the organizers for the invitation. I'm delighted to join this gathering of women and a few men interested in discussing the topic of women in STEM. And on top of that, I'm truly happy because all this is happening at ISEG, that is, in my case, at home. In my talk, I will be looking at not only women in STEM, but to the overall picture in which women and men are involved as key actors in the labor market, and to both processes and challenges. As in my view, these elements are closely intertwined with the gaps and challenges that we find in the STEM domain. First, I need to ask for your kind understanding, but my research has been focused on the European Union context, so my data relates to that landscape. So, regarding labor market participation, we can see, let me just actually check if it's more or less okay. We can see that apart from a few countries at the bottom of this figure, we have employment rates for women within the EU above 60%. And in almost half of the countries is now around 70 or even above, Portugal included. So this figure, this graph, is consistent with the research that has shown how consolidated has been women's participation in employment, in the labor market. And this is also associated with the impressive investment women have made in their qualifications, in their human capital in general. However, so this is the first mind the gap. When we take into account the employment rate for men, the difference in relation to employment rates for women is still relatively high in some countries, and in the EU is about 10 percentage points. So still a long way to go to narrow, to eliminate this gap. Moreover, we can also see that countries in which the employment rate is relatively high for women also have high proportions of women involved in part-time work. And as you can see, part-time work is a female-dominated form of employment with all the traps involved in it. It's not the topic today, maybe later on. Then, this is one of the most interesting data, I would say. That is, in 21 out of 27 countries, at a macro level in general, we can see that women tend to interrupt their careers after childbirth and during the highly demanding period after that. So the employment rate declines among women who are mothers, who have children, small children, so aged under 6. In only 6 countries, the employment rate for women who are mothers of small children is higher than in relation to those who are childless. Portugal, again, included. So Portugal is a very interesting case study, as you can see, but it's not the topic today. So what we have at the moment is a well-established dual earner model in the European Union, so women and men in the labor market, but still, despite all the progresses in terms of gender roles, men are still seen as the main breadwinners and women as the primary carers. So we are still far from the universal model of both men and women as breadwinners and as carers. And actually, the research undertaken by the latest Nobel laureate in economics, Claudia Goldin, has just shown that the employment gap between mothers and fathers as the key explanation for the wider gender pay gap between these two groups. Career interruptions, part-time work, all these factors account for the gender pay gap within the EU, as well as the underrepresentation of women in senior management leadership positions and job segregation. So women are still overrepresented in lower paid industrial sectors and occupations. So apparently, we would say that bring women to the STEAM domain would contribute to push down the gender pay gap. However, it does not magically disappear. We know, and it's very well documented, that the gender pay gap is even higher in male-dominated sectors, the ICT, for instance, included. STEAM is like a rainbow. And with this metaphor, the implication is that STEAM is a catalog that entails a variety of scientific and professional fields, and actually the situation of women varies across those sectors, industrial sectors and scientific domains. So we have actually women outnumbering men in many scientific fields and even in engineering, for instance. So that's what we need to take into account. And as we all know, the most critical situation now is in relation to the ICT sector in particular in terms of women's representation. So looking at the proportion of women in total graduates, it's about 21% in the EU. So still a long way to go again. And the situation is even more critical when we take into account the ICT specialists. So the overall average within the EU is around 19%. How can we overcome this? Well, I'm being very ambitious. So how can we fix the pipeline? And my point is that it's only possible to do that by implementing, trying to bring together different actors, key actors, in a well-articulated endeavor. So I would like to, focus on that, the role of the state and public policies, of employers, of the business sector, social partners, NGOs, and so on and so forth. So first, the role of public policies in education are absolutely fundamental in tackling the gender pay gap by embedding a gender equality perspective in the curricula from early childhood to universities. I used to say that gender equality is a project of freedom. It's about liberate girls and boys, women and men from restrictive gender norms and gender stereotypes. So by doing that, we will have more men interested in being primary teachers and work in childcare facilities, for instance, and women aiming to be astronauts, leading a global ICT company or run a whole nation, for instance. Family policies, they were already mentioned. They are absolutely vital again in ensuring the equal participation of men and women in paid work and in family and care responsibilities as well. And one way that we have at our disposal to accelerate that is by providing by law equal rights to men and women in terms of maternity and paternity rights, parental rights, in addition, of course, to affordable and high-quality care facilities. The role of proactive labor policies, there is scope for improvement. We need that in vocational training, proactive measures, intended to counter occupational segregation. Of course, the social partners also have an important role to play in this domain. And the employers, they are an important player in terms of, fixing the leaky pipeline. The need to adopt a gender equality strategy. That is not just window dressing, just written in the company policy, but is translated into daily practices. The willingness to revise the organizational culture and to dismantle the conditions that froze ambitions, expectations, aspirations of so many highly qualified and committed women, the frozen rabbit syndrome that occurs when they face hostile organizational cultures. So again, well documented. It happens quite often in male-dominated sectors. So this willingness to revise the organizational cultures and make them more inclusive for men and women will, of course, pay off and is absolutely fundamental as well. I think I have to accelerate a little bit. So, of course, we all know the role of media and advertising and their social responsibility in tackling gender stereotypes as well. And all of us, we need to intensify our partnerships and collaborations, yes, and make, try to elaborate and implement collaborative projects, make the gaps visible, and engage wider publics in discussing the gaps and finding and co-creating the right solutions to overcome the challenges that we still have. Almost the final word to women, to those women who are in powerful positions, in the right positions, to exercise substantive representation. It means to give the hand up to other women. Don't forget that. I try not to do it as well. Sorry about this. And my last slide. Well, this note was released 2 or 3 years ago by the World Economic Forum. And I must admit that I have shown this slide a few times, but the message underlying it is so powerful. So for over 150 years, scientists have considered that birdsong was a male attribute. So finally, research has shown that both male and female birds sing. And that fantastic discovery is due to female researchers who have entered in this scientific domain. So it just shows us how important it is to have both men and women in all domains and walks of life with their views and insights and tacit knowledge and skills. And that is the basis for more credible and objective scientific outputs, is the basis for more qualified and responsive policy decisions, to boost creativity and knowledge in the business sector, and so on and so forth. I keep my optimism because as a scientist, I'm fully aware of the power of evidence. Thank you very much. Thank you.